Alright everyone, please actually listen to the video before anyone who's like full Trump mode actually jumps down my throat and says, oh, well, you're just being partisan or something. It's a bunch of leftists that want net neutrality because Ron Paul told me so. I'm going to explain my views, and they're a little bit different from what you're going to get from like Demand Progress or one of those groups. And that is this. First and foremost, I've come to the conclusion we have to save net neutrality, or at least try. But the reason for that is different from what these other groups are giving you. They want to tell you, oh, these private companies will fuck everybody over. The ISPs will run roughshod, throttle the internet. They'll charge more for like premium packages, and pretty soon the internet will be like cable, which is a risk, honestly, but unlikely one because of economic constraints being what they are and the nature of competition among ISPs in most parts of the country. I want to preserve net neutrality, though, and I encourage you to follow the link in the description so you can go get more info and do your part as a temporary measure. And here's my idea. If we completely privatize the internet and let the ISPs do whatever they want, there's really nothing that we can do in the future to preserve the free and open internet. If they take the draconian step of getting together as a bunch of plutocrats and decide to throttle everything, there won't be anyone with the capital necessary to stand in their way. The FCC will never bend because of all the money involved. They'll never actually give the capability to these other sites that are like Google Fiber and stuff that want to provide services themselves. There's a regulatory stricture against that. Not sure that should even exist, by the way. But right now, you've got some parts of the country where there's only one ISP. Unless you want to pay thousands of dollars for some very, very high-end private service where you're using an inordinate amount of money for your bandwidth. Unless you want to do that, like here, you're using Comcast. In the state of Vermont, you've got Comcast Internet, which really sucks, by the way, in some ways. I don't have as much of a complaint about them as many people. But I can remember, like, you're in Texas, you got 4 or 5 different groups that want to service you internet, so you've got choices. A little bit of a different scenario. But if we preserve net neutrality, here's a better idea. We preserve it for now, and we immediately move towards trying to get a constitutional amendment passed to specifically delineate the rights and privileges of companies on the internet. That is, ISPs shall not throttle bandwidth. The internet must be a totally free market as far as data is concerned. There will be no censorship by U.S. firms. No U.S. firm will be served by the licensed ISPs unless they conform to the First and Fourth Amendments. That is, privacy online. You're not going to share information with people unless you got an actual honest-to-goodness warrant, a very good legal reason to do so. People's free speech and free expression will be explicitly protected, their publishing rights and so forth. Beyond harassment and copyright law and slander and things like that, there shouldn't be any regulatory system on the internet. That's what we need to do. We need to strip it out of the hands of the government at the FCC and bureaucratic level eventually. Right now, it's better to keep it in the hands of the government because the government is constrained by the Constitution explicitly. Their ability to abuse you online is very, very limited. However, if you privatize it, those private companies can run roughshod if they choose to do so. I choose to believe it's unlikely, but do we really want to take the chance that they do immediately start a campaign of, oh, well, we can make so much more money if we charge like premium package to get certain websites, premium package for non-throttled bandwidth to smaller websites or to specific larger websites that maybe we don't like so much, or something like that. You would have, the internet would go topsy-turvy and it would be chaos. Now, at that point, if they try it and it causes chaos online, the outcry, the outpouring of resistance would be so great they'd probably stop. But again, do we want to run that risk? Whereas we've had net neutrality, and I don't see the promulgation of like government bureaucracy and regulation online because the government doesn't want to touch that issue any more than the ISPs do. However, after net neutrality is hopefully saved, we need to move towards a constitutional system that specifically it will prevent European-style censorship from applying to anybody in the United States. No U.S. firm should bow before foreign censorship or legalism. They shouldn't cooperate with them. They are not subject to lawsuits by these foreign states. It's up to those foreign states locally to police their population if they choose to do so. That we can cooperate on. You got some German citizen, they posted a swastika and the Gestapo wants to drag them into the communist gulag for doing so, for wrongthink or something, you go ahead and do that and the firms can cooperate. But we're not going to give you any info on U.S. citizens. We're not going to store their data. There's not going to be mass surveillance. There will be no bandwidth throttling. There will be no kicking people offline for having wrongthink opinions here. Their rights will be respected, and the First Amendment should be construed as applying to private firms that do business within the United States online as well. We can do that in a roundabout way. How do you apply the First Amendment to a company like that? It's quite simple. Government already oversees the ISPs. So you simply refuse to service any site that's being abusive to people. And that will keep them in line. You won't even really have to enforce it for the most part. Just the threat of the legalese involved, of private users suing a company, will generally keep them, towing the line. If we do that, we don't have to have the net neutrality debate because the FCC won't need to be involved with the internet beyond, again, overseeing, this ISP is or is not conforming to that constitutional framework that is required for them to conform to in order to operate online. And you certainly won't need the ISPs being in charge of everything. So for right now, the best thing to do is to preserve net neutrality, keep the net the way that it is, so that in the future we can reform things further to be even more pro-freedom. But we'll need to have the wherewithal to do that. It'll require a massive number of people working in tandem. It'll require more effort than is currently being put into saving net neutrality. You've got like Google and Facebook and all, Reddit, 4chan, everybody else under the sun is standing with net neutrality. When I see Mozilla and some of these anonymous sites all getting together under the same banner, it's a pretty good indicator that's probably where we need to be standing. Because I generally feel positively towards these sites. I may not care that Zuckerberg wants to preserve net neutrality, because screw Zuckerberg, he likes to steal your info too. And I may not care that Google cares about it, or Microsoft, or Apple or something, but I do care if Firefox is involved. I tend to be rather more trusting of them and their judgment than many of these other sites. As far as, it's a bunch of leftist sites involved, well, yeah, some right-wing site that would get screwed if net neutrality went bye-bye and the ISPs did throttle things probably is not willing to raise the specter of that issue in such a hyper-partisan climate. Doesn't mean that they don't fundamentally agree. They're just not going to say anything about it. You've got this over and over. Partisan politics in this country makes things so much more convoluted than they have to be. Either it is or is not a good idea to scrap net neutrality. I say it is not a good idea. After some time of saying before, who cares? The ISPs are probably not going to do shit, and otherwise we're handing things to the FCC. It would be better to preserve net neutrality, but only as a short-term solution. The alternative right now is worse, but we need to replace net neutrality in the future with a constitutionalist framework for the internet. Specifically to constrain both government and private entities from dicking around on the internet. It should be the absolute free flow of information. If you want to profit online, go ahead. It's the point. It's why it's there. But if you're attempting to build that profit margin by screwing over the Constitution, then it becomes a problem for me. I'm not one of those ANCAPs that thinks, it's perfectly fine to be violate. The NAP can be broken by private companies because, just do business with somebody else. That's not really pragmatic, and that's not really how the real world works. It's a little bit idealistic. And always beware of people within systems that lean too heavily into idealism, don't remark upon reality, but instead some pipe dream that they have. This is the case with any ideology. It's like communists saying that communism can actually be put into place without a statist model. Well, it can't. That's utopian nonsense. The idea that you can actually have a fully anarchic society and no abuse, and that everything will be hunky-dory, that's utopian nonsense. That is, all you have to do is extend the Constitution to cover the internet explicitly. It already does essentially anyway. I mean, it's fairly clear. You have the right to say what you want on the internet. There are relatively few proper restrictions of that. And these private companies should be sucking people off to be more and more libertarian, honestly. If they really wanted to profit. And they shouldn't be listening to Europe. They should be totally ignoring the Gestapo over in Germany and all these other groups in Western Europe. But instead, they feel pressured by the world, the globalized situation of the world, which is unfortunate. But we need to save net neutrality for now. We preserve that and keep it from getting scrapped, and then thereafter we can look towards better and brighter things that'll solve the problem permanently. If we lose net neutrality, though, it's not clear we're going to be able to do that, at least not in the short term. And then if the ISPs do become abusive, then you have a problem. It's going to cause a lot of issues. It would require an enormous amount of effort to reverse it, much more than simply saving net neutrality now and then trying to formulate something better, I think, down the road. And again, I say this as someone who has reservations about the idea of the government regulating the ISPs significantly in the first place, beyond saying, yes, this company is registered to handle this sort of essentially public work style system. We need less regulation, less censorship in every possible way in this country and in the whole world. Now, there was a time we stood for liberty. We need to do that again, and we need to bully the Western Europeans into giving up their censorship if they want to use U.S. sites. That's what I think we should hold the internet over their heads, over Merkel's head, and over Macron's head, and over Theresa May's head. Say, no, all these hate speech laws, they're not going to apply to any U.S. site, and we're not going to give you any info on users. You go ahead and ban the site if you want. See what people in your country say. When they can't get on Facebook, when they can't use YouTube, when they can't use Twitter, when they can't go to 4chan or Reddit, they're going to be hurting for certain, and you're going to be hurting even more because they're going to start petitions to remove you from office. And we're going to actively encourage it too, because we've got sites that you won't block that are in your countries, you idiots. That's what we should be doing. Instead of trying to bow before some minuscule foreign state because it's pro-censorship. Screw off. Develop your own YouTube. See how many people use it. Look at Daily Motion sometime. That's about all. Peace out.